Picture this: a secretive, ancient military strategy, so audacious and, frankly, chilling that it fundamentally altered the course of empires. We're talking about a highly calculated process designed to gather children and meticulously mold them into the most perfect, lethal, and unyielding fighting machine the ancient world had ever seen. Welcome to Part 4 of our Explainer series. Today, we're unlocking the vaults of history to examine a force built purely to conquer, a force that eventually became a literal nightmare for its own creators.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our grand stage is Constantinople, the glittering jewel and impregnable center of the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, this incredible city witnessed the rise and fall of countless armies. But the story we're focusing on today, it isn't about your traditional army raised from the countryside. No, it's about a dramatic, high-stakes historical experiment that unfolded right here in the shadow of these great domes and minarets.
And it really begs this fascinating and honestly terrifying question. What happens when an empire builds a weapon so powerful, it actually threatens its own creators? Think of it like a military Frankenstein's monster. The state poured absolutely all its resources into engineering a flawless, unstoppable striking force. But when you create an entity designed purely for power and violence, what happens when that unquestioning obedience begins to crack?
Well, we're going to map out this wild, chronological journey to see exactly how this ultimate weapon evolved. It all kicks off in 1362 with their systematic founding by Sultan Murad I, sweeps through a terrifying golden age in the 1400s and 1500s, where they hit their absolute apex of power. And then it ends in a sudden, explosive, and incredibly bloody climax in June 1826. Section 1. Forging the Janissary Army. So, back in the 14th century, the empire was expanding rapidly, and Sultan Murad I realized he needed a completely new kind of guard. He came up with the Janissaries, which literally translates to new soldiers. In 1362, the empire kicked off this radical, unprecedented strategy. They weren't just drafting ordinary citizens for a summer campaign. These guys were a uniquely molded elite infantry unit designed from the ground up for one singular, uncompromising purpose: absolute, unquestioning obedience to the throne. And this brilliantly illustrates just how calculated and relentless that creation process was. Step 1. The state gathered 1/5 of captive youths, taking them from their origins at a very young age. Step 2. They plunged them into strict religious and military training, teaching them the ultimate arts of discipline and war. And Step 3. Absolute devotion. They were entirely isolated from the outside world. They were raised from childhood to be fiercely disciplined warriors with literally no other family but their regiment.
But it wasn't just physical. The spiritual foundation was just as intense. Listen to this legendary blessing given to the unit by the revered holy man Haji Bektash. Make their swords sharp and crown them with victory forever. He blessed them, gave them their name, and instilled this deep religious fervor. To these young men, this wasn't just a military job. It was a sacred, lifelong calling.
Section 2. Rise of an Invincible Force. Man, once these meticulously forged soldiers actually hit the battlefield, their growth was just staggering. They fought with a zeal and a tactical brilliance that quickly earned them a fearsome, practically unstoppable reputation across entire continents. They started out as a tight-knit infantry of just 6,000 men, but as their military successes multiplied and they became the indispensable core of the state's power, they doubled in size, swelling to a peak of 12,000 heavily armed, fiercely competitive combatants.
And with that kind of immense power came tremendous rewards. Their unmatched bravery earned them an elite, almost untouchable status. They became the exclusive personal guards to the Sultan. They were showered with the highest honors, feared and deeply respected across the entire empire. Their unparalleled battlefield discipline made them the most pampered, yet undeniably lethal, unit in the state. They were, for sure, the ultimate fighting machine of their era.
Section 3. The rebellion begins. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast it shows. Because as history constantly reminds us, unchecked power rarely stays pure. The early Janissaries, disciplined, flawlessly loyal, invincible. Yet over the centuries, they evolved into something incredibly dangerous. Their immense power and elite status totally corrupted their original purpose. They became rebellious, deeply corrupt kingmakers. They figured out that if they possessed the power to protect the throne, they also possessed the raw military might to overthrow it. They essentially morphed into a new Praetorian Guard.
Just like those notorious guards of ancient Rome, they started using their military might to violently dictate state politics. Whenever they felt even slightly disrespected, they'd barricade themselves inside the capital city, demand extravagant privileges, and plunge the whole government into absolute chaos. The supposed protectors became the absolute supreme threat to the state itself.
Section 4. The Auspicious Incident.
So the tension becomes completely unsustainable. It's a terrifying, high-stakes, kill-or-be-killed scenario right at the heart of the empire. And finally, the hammer falls. June 1826, the annihilation. Sultan Mahmud II, who had been secretly preparing his own loyal artillery and entirely new troops, ordered the absolute, devastating destruction of the Janissary order. There was no room for negotiation, no path for retreat. This was the sudden, brutal end.
The details of this explosive climax are incredibly grim. The Janissaries were strategically trapped in the At-Maidan Square in the capital. They were fired upon by heavy artillery and massacred without mercy. And the purge didn't stop there. New military laws were instantly enacted, and surviving members were ruthlessly hunted down across the empire's furthest borders. In a matter of days, a once invincible fighting machine and its centuries-old legacy was violently erased from existence. Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds into the bigger picture, what changed the world.
You see, the fall of the Janissaries wasn't just about internal palace politics. It was also about a rapidly changing world where ancient infantry tactics just weren't cutting it anymore. While empires were wrestling with their own elite guards, entirely different forces were quietly reshaping the globe. Consider the compass, discovered for European use around 1302. This single, unassuming little tool did more to expand empires than any army of foot soldiers ever could. It conquered untamed oceans, bridged impossible distances, and suddenly connected distant nations, bringing unprecedented wealth to whoever could navigate this new global theater.
And then there was gunpowder.
Perfected and widespread in warfare by the 1330s, this explosive force fueled devastating cannons. It was the ultimate equalizer. Suddenly, ancient swords, traditional shields, and the most impregnable city walls were rendered completely and utterly obsolete. The fundamental rules of military power had shifted forever. So, it leaves us with this huge question. How did simple inventions like the compass and gunpowder shift the fate of global empires forever? How did emerging technology outpace the ultimate fighting machines of the ancient world? Well, that is exactly what we are going to uncover next. I can't wait to see you for our fifth and final explainer, where we'll explore the explosive dawn of the modern era.